How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we got a jam-packed Big Mets update segment to get into right here, right now. I just finished my segment in the Bleacher Report app, in which I am a weekly host from Wednesday to Friday at 4 p.m. sharp, covering MLB-wide topics, and today we emphasize the latest on Alonso, so check that out in case you haven't already. It's in the community tab on the YouTube channel, and you guys will see me in the BR app again, same time, same place tomorrow as well this Friday. But folks, let's get into the news. Right as I was about to hit record on this video, bam, Jeff Passan of ESPN, we see it beside me. Jurickson Profar is an Atlanta Brave. Have yet to find out the contract details, and we'll touch more on them later on in our live stream a couple hours from now, so be on the lookout for that. But Profar going to the Atlanta Braves is immediate impact in this NL East, and what's going to be an absolute bloodbath between the Mets, between the Braves, between the Phillies, and to a degree, the Washington Nationals. We're going to touch on not only Profar landing at Atlanta, why exactly that happened, what this means for the Braves, the Mets, and others going forward, but how Pete Alonso is advancing in talks to potentially be a Toronto Blue Jay. To what degree as well, we will get into here shortly, everybody. So make sure to smash that like and subscribe on your way. And let me see your initial reactions, comments down below to it all. And shout out to our amazing sponsor at BetUS that has you covered not only with all your sports betting needs, but also your casino needs, everybody. Get ready for the rush with BetUS Casino. Generous promotions and tournaments make every play even more rewarding. Sign up now and experience the difference. Get your bonus 200% sign-up bonus up to $5,000 and 250% crypto sign-up bonus up to $5,000. Good luck to you all. Make sure you bet responsibly, casino responsibly, all with our amazing friends here at BetUS. But as we deep dive right into this one, as you guys can see beside me, Jurickson Profar is an Atlanta Brave. And yes, that guts me just because not that Jurickson Profar was an end-all be-all potential fit for this Mets team, but man, oh man, to see him land with the Atlanta Braves after seeing what the Dodgers just did between Scott, Yates, the big headline of all, Roki Sasaki, the teams that are going to be the biggest thorn in the Mets side in 2025 are continuing to get better. And we all knew that Alex Anthopoulos had a trick up his sleeve. He had literally made no moves in the free agent market to this point this offseason, so it's not shocking that in a very Braves fashion, it comes out of nowhere and bam, Profar, who's coming off of a career season there, is age 31 year, who can play corner outfield positions, can give you reps at first base DH. He is the exact kind of versatile corner outfielder that the Braves are so desperately looking for heading into 2025, and that's exactly what they are getting. Profar, the biggest risk with him is that he has not had 2 consecutive seasons where he has been a league average batter. He was above league average by roughly 40% this year with a career high 24 home runs, a 380 OBP with a 280 average, and just a very strong OPS and an over 4 WAR. He was, again, the highest WAR player now available in the free agent market, along with Alex Bregman and to a certain degree Pete Alonso. But now that Profar is off the board, a guy that could have potentially been a fit for the Mets if, say, hey, they wanted to trade Starling Marte and have Profar and Winker be their true tandem at DH, along with giving Profar more reps maybe in the corner outfield, maybe shifting Nimmo a little bit to center for times that his foot isn't, acting up too much. That way you have more offensive output than what you'd be getting guys in Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri at center. But no, instead, Jurickson Profar, who was a fit not only for the Mets to a degree, especially if Alonso walks, where Profar could be utilized at first base to a certain understanding. The Toronto Blue Jays had showed a decent amount of interest in Profar as well. So what does this all have to do with Alonso in the sweepstakes? It really puts the emphasis on him and Alex Bregman, as they are far and away the true clear bats still available in the free agent market. Mets fans, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd love to hear how frustrated you are with the Atlanta Braves landing Jurickson Profar. Does this concern you at all as a fan? And ultimately, what do you think this impact will have now on the NL East? Because Profar has been a thorn in the Mets side. He was a killer against us in the 2022 wild card for the Padres. He had a down year last year in Colorado, but even with having a great half season where you're in cores where you could really juice your offensive numbers, Profar couldn't do that in such a depleted lineup in Colorado, the way that he surely made up for it in his bounce back year, a career year at the age of 31 now with the San Diego Padres. He stays in the NL, and now he'll be battling it up against against the Padres, against the Mets, and other key contending teams there out of the National League. But how this impacts the Mets in the pursuit of Alonso could be interesting, and we're going to highlight this more in our live show later on today that I'd imagine will be live anywhere, I'd probably say between 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern, around that range. Be on the lookout, folks, barring changes, as we will likely be live or have content out tomorrow too, as I'm waiting to find out more information to share when having to do with Amazing Day. I just haven't said anything too much on that yet because I'm waiting for things to be finalized, if they'll be finalized on my front for the Fan Fest this weekend. If you know, you know. But let's pivot now, folks, to talking about Jurickson Profar, to now talking about the man of the hour, to some of you at least, and that's going to be Pete Alonso, everybody, because what we have seen the latest on the Alonso front is news that is good. It's encouraging if you're a Toronto Blue Jays fan. fan, it is not so encouraging if you're a Mets fan that wants Alonso to return and really buys into every single report you see. We did hear rumblings earlier today from people without credibility throughout the Mets community space that were noting that apparently Alonso was approached with around the same type of contract offer that the Mets gave, but this time by the Toronto Blue Jays. There's been nothing to confirm that at this point in time, so I would not believe everything you see out there. A lot of people just love to ride the coattails of what everyone else is saying. As someone who relays information every single day, I understand that I fall in that category too, but this is more so just for the sake of breaking it down and having the discussion versus actually believing it. So one, I have not heard anything of credibility that Alonso has been approached by Toronto with a contract offer around 3 years of 70 to 75 million, but that has been a rumor that's floated out there. I'd say take that with a heavy grain of salt right now, but I just want you guys to be informed because we did see Andy Martino of SNY, and the only reason why I just have it there for myself is because Andy has me not so able to connect with him on one X account, but the other I can without a problem. As you see here, Andy Martino of SNY did state that the talks are advancing between the Blue Jays and Pete Alonso. Nothing is imminent at this point in time, and obviously nothing is set in stone, a done deal at the moment, but talks have continued after they landed Anthony Santander. Now, just 48 hours ago or so, we touched on the platform how the Mets' odds of bringing back Alonso felt like that they have increased after the Blue Jays landed Anthony Santander, and for good reason, because the reality is if the Blue Jays are trying to orchestrate the best team both offensively and defensively, it really doesn't make a lot of sense as to why Alonso is a fit in Toronto after you land Santander, who profiles better at DH as a switch hitting phenom than anything else. But if you are going to give Santander more outfield reps, then I understand how this opens the floodgates more for Alonso to get either a balance between DH and first base, giving Vladdy some opportunity at third base, which he himself is on record of saying he wants in his walk year, per Ken Rosenthal and Wolf Salmon from the Athletic articles that came out over the past couple weeks. Vladdy actually likes the idea of playing more than the hot corner this year to increase his market value, because we know he's not going to get extended by the Blue Jays until we find out news to suggest otherwise from now up until spring training. So what is inevitably going to be a walk year for Vladdy, should he not be traded by the deadline per se, he's a guy that, again, wants to maximize his value. And a way to do that, certainly, and I highlighted this in my Bleacher Report video earlier today, is that if Vladdy gets a decent amount of reps at third base, even if it's, just a chunk, for a certain amount of games, and he's proficient there, or at least normal and not, a complete liability, that's going to help, because more versatility means more buyers, more teams that would have interest in Vladdy than what they typically do in the free agent market if he's a standalone first baseman. He's even with all of his upside, and Vladdy has a lot of it. We're going to talk about it in tonight's show. We'll get into how if the Blue Jays do in fact somehow, some way land Alonso, that increases the likelihood of a Vladimir Guerrero trade deadline trade if the Blue Jays are in fact not in a postseason position by the time we get to the deadline. But there's no denying that if they acquire Alonso, that'll help them get and be a competitive wild card type team out of the AL East in what's going to be a battle all year long against the Red Sox, who are getting better, the Orioles, who are moving more laterally, which I don't like for them, the Yankees, even after losing Soto, made some proper moves elsewhere in their bullpen, their rotation, and aspects of their lineup to a degree, and the Tampa Bay Rays are always pesky. So we know it's an uphill battle in the AL East, and it makes sense for the Toronto Blue Jays, a team that's swung and missed on every significant free agent, going back to Kevin Gausman and George Springer up until, Justin Turner to a lesser extent from a year plus ago. And now what they just did in Anthony Santander, they've swung and missed a lot, and they have a lot of money to spend in Toronto. We know this, but are they going to be able to do enough to bring in Alonso? Because as these talks are advancing, is this a continued negotiation tactic? Because as we know, with the Mets making it abundantly clear that there's right around a $20 million gap between themselves and Alonso, for those that are unaware, the Mets' last contract reportedly that they offered Alonso was standing firm on a 3-year deal with a first-year opt-out, which was right around $70 million total, $23 million of average annual value, which again hasn't paid just as much, if not more, than guys like Matt Olson out of the Braves. So it's not like he's not getting good money, but it's the term that's the problem. But here's the thing: Alonso initially approached the Mets with a 6-year deal, 5, a 4, and then ultimately a 3 exclusive with an opt-out. And the Mets said, listen, we love you, Pete, but we want you back at our price, even with this $20 million gap. Good luck with seeking suitors elsewhere. Good luck in that very limited market. Well, the Toronto Blue Jays are not only desperate, but they just may show their willingness to completely disregard the priority on defense and heavily prioritize the fit on offense alone, just like they did in 2021, where sadly they went nowhere with one of the best offenses I've ever seen in my lifetime, with Marcus Semien, Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel. What do these guys have in common? They're no longer in Toronto because their front office are very stubborn and very not so savvy with their decision making over the past couple years. Many could rightfully argue, but regardless, I'm getting on a tangent there. Going back to Alonso, they want to prioritize offensive output. If you land Alonso, he can play first base, DH. Santander can get more reps in the outfield, even though that he will be below league average plenty in those corner outfield positions, giving Vladdy some reps at third. Alonso, who's been very stubborn throughout his career, as a guy who prides himself as a first baseman. Would that change now, knowing that maybe the Mets are on the outside looking in as a proper suitor for him, in his eyes at least, versus a team like Toronto, who clearly wants him and are showing their willingness as to how much they want him? Could that be enough of a needle mover for Alonso to say, hey, I won't be as stubborn if I'm playing first base or DH. I just want to go somewhere that they want me and are giving me more of the AAV that I'm looking for. Then okay, he may be a Toronto Blue Jay. But as I'm going to emphasize in tonight's live show, and I'll say it again, each and every one of you, good chance we'll have a special guest in tonight's live show too that might be coming out of the Toronto Blue Jays community. So be on the lookout for that. Very excited to have that conversation later on this evening. But I'm here to say right now that for Alonso, if he is going to sign a short-term contract north of 3 years with an opt-out, and it isn't the Mets, that'll really surprise me, because that tells me a couple things. One, the Mets clearly have not prioritized Alonso returning from the start. It's been at their price and only their price. They're not losing sleep over losing him. They have thoughts and plans on how to replace him, even if it isn't initially in the way that fans want it to be. And I'm not in favor of staying solely in-house with Vientos and then Beatty at the hot corner. And I'll make that abundantly clear, even if that is potentially what myself, or we'll see what happens with Amazing Day this weekend, if I'll be there or not, along with what is happening going forward this offseason. I will make it vocalized very clear that I think the Mets would be making a mistake if they stayed solely in-house. And after losing Profar as a potential fit for them, at least as a bat that could help compensate for losing Alonso's upside, this becomes a greater problem if Alonso, say, settles with Toronto on the exclusive deal that he essentially approached the Mets with, and then goes with Toronto, and then, say, signs with anywhere from 370, 375. If Alonso signs for pretty much the identical contract the Mets offered, and he said no, that tells you that the bridge is burned right there. That tells you that clearly he doesn't want to come back, and because of how negotiations went. And it also will be very questionable as to how Alonso performs. I do think that his numbers would do very well. That bat would do great in Toronto, and that dome for half the season, with Vladdy and Santander all around him, and that lineup I think would bode him well for sure. But at the same time, Alonso's only known Queens. We all saw how much he struggled in 2024 with the deepest lineup on paper you could argue that he's been a part of yet. That's without Juan Soto yet, mind you. And up until postseason, Alonso was one of the most unreliable batters for the Mets in the clutch that you could ask out of everyone 1 through 9 throughout the entire course of the 162. Is Alonso really going to bet on himself again in a potential walk year? This time, not only with a different team, but with a team like Toronto, which is very foreign for someone like him. Could that be a play? It is a play. We know that. But is that actually the best fit for him as someone who clearly struggled in that so-called walk year label that Scott Boras initially had on him as he was inevitably hitting the free agent market? I need to see it to believe it. It's not that it's impossible, but it's just hard to fathom knowing how much Alonso has struggled the past couple years with his offensive output and regular season, and how if he's really trying to bank on himself and to maximize his value, it doesn't make sense for him to consider getting any decent time at DH then, because it'll lower his value even more versus trying to be at least a league average first baseman when he's playing his best defensively. And B, this is also an Alonso that after having an underwhelming year because of his so-called walk year, how do you expect him to then have drastically different numbers 1 year in Toronto and then bam, hit the free agent market and look for that bag north of $200 million the way that Marcus Semien looked for that bag after having his one and done there in Toronto 3-4 years ago? It's a fair question, and we're going to highlight all this in our show later on tonight, if not tomorrow, so be on the lookout for it, everybody. But that is the initial news on the Alonso front. The talks with the Jays are advancing. Jurickson Profar is sadly an Atlanta Brave, and David Stearns and the Mets are far from done making their moves. What's next for them? When will we find out these moves? That's a great question. We'll touch on all as soon as it happens here on the platform, folks. So thank you guys so much for smashing that like and subscribe button on your way out, chiming into our live stream a couple hours from now at the time of recording this, barring changes. Big show tonight, so be on the lookout, folks, and thank you kindly for the endless support here on WardyNYM. We will have a giveaway on the platform as early next week for a Mets shirt jersey for any player that one lucky winner will win in our live stream next week. So be on the lookout, folks. Until then, have a great rest of your night, evening, whenever you're watching this. And this is your guy, Wardy, signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace.